Backyard Farmer is a co-production of NET Television and Nebraska Extension.
Tonight on Backyard Farmer, we kick off the season with a look at garden soil, and we'll check out clover for St. Patty's Day. That's all coming up next, right here on Backyard Farmer. Hello again, and welcome to another season of Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd, and we are so excited to get started early and on a new day. We've got a great show to kick off this year, but first let's introduce tonight's expert panel from Nebraska Extension and UNL Landscape Services. We have insect guy Fred Baxendale.
Hi, Kim. Great to be back for another season.
We have debut sitting in the turf chair, Jeff Culbertson, Landscape Services.
Happy St. Patty's Day, Kim.
Amy Timmerman comes all the way down from Green Beer O'Neill for Rots and Spots.
Hello from the Irish capital of Nebraska.
And Sarah Browning is going to answer all of our horticulture questions, including clover.
That's right. Good to be back, Kim.
For 63 seasons, we've been answering your gardening questions. Tonight is no different, and we would love to hear from you. You can ask our panel of master gardeners and garden center professionals from Finkeys your questions by dialing 402-472-1212 if you live in Lincoln. Our toll-free number is 800-676-5446. If you have pictures, you can email us at byf@unl.edu. We usually answer those emails on a future show, and if you do send us one, it really helps if you give us as much information as you can, including where you live. We promise we're not going to send solicitors. So you can also follow us on our Facebook fan page and on Twitter. Keep in mind, we can't get to everybody's question on the air, but you can always go to the Backyard Farmer website, you can visit your local extension office, or you can talk to your local garden center professional for more information. Before we go to questions, we always start with samples. We're going to take a look at a woolly bear.
A woolly bear caterpillar.
It's not fall.
But they overwinter as caterpillars. So, okay, this is kind of really a fun one. So when I was out working in my landscape over the weekend, it was really nice and warm. I came across this little guy crawling north in my landscape. So I thought I'd bring it along and kind of make it the bug of the week. This is a really interesting one that has a lot of folklore connected with it. It turns out that, in the South, they refer to these as woolly worms, and in fact, in South Carolina, they have woolly worm festivals, a whole week event. So here we go, you're gonna crawl around a little bit. So it's kind of a fun one. But the legend is that you can tell the severity of the upcoming winter by the pattern of black and orange on the woolly bear's body. All right, and it turns out that the longer the black segments are, the more severe the weather will be, and conversely, the shorter the black segments, the less severe the weather will be. So, kind of fun. Well, turns out that it's probably not all that accurate, because basically the length of the segments are dependent on the age, the species, specific species, and most importantly, the feeding history of the insect during the summer. So really it's based on the previous summer. So it's kind of a debunked myth. But still, it's a fun one. One other thing. Turns out, I made the comment that it was heading north. The other legend that if you find them and they're heading south, they're trying to get away from the cold winter, so it's going to be more severe. And if they're heading north, it's going to be less severe because they're heading north. So, woolly bear caterpillar, one of my very favorite insects, and certainly all part of nature's wondrous pageantry.
Thank you, Fred. We have to start the show with that. All right, Jeff.
Well, we have an ornamental white clover here, which is kind of with the theme clover and St. Patrick's Day. So this particular one has several 4, 3, 5 leaf little petals here you'll see on here. So I think what would be nice about this, if we use this in a perennial bed, be a nice ground cover perhaps at the front of a perennial bed. Certainly very hardy for here. You might have to keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't spread too much for you, but something a little different than our typical white clover in our lawn.
And so point out they're a 4-leafer for anybody who needs some good luck tonight.
Yeah, I do.
There's one right in front of the camera.
Yeah, I think
Excellent
right
work.
there, yeah.
We go. Awesome.
That's pretty cool.
All right, Amy, you just got to love those rots and spots.
You can find rots and spots no matter what time of year it is. So we have a nice collection of crab apples, and every year we get questions about apple scab, and we talk about management and trying to remove those leaves, but it doesn't always work, and we can really see why here. So we got some apples that are left over from last summer that the birds haven't ate, but you also take a look. Then we have what we call cedar apple or crab apple mummies. And we get these on all of our species that produce fruit. And so the apple scab infects the fruit and it prevents it from developing all the way. And then this serves as an inoculum source for this spring. So when we start getting those wet, rainy conditions this spring, as the leaves are starting to leaf out, this is how this fungus is going to spread. It's just going to splash the spores from this little mummy onto the leaves that are adjacent to it. So that's the reason why apple scab can be so notorious, because we can never get rid of the inoculum source because these hang on the tree. And by looking at some of them, I could look at them and it looks like some of them are already sporulated, like this one looks like it's sporulated already. Well, it isn't the right time of the year for it to sporulate. So this probably sporulated last year and it's still attached to the tree. So, if you really wanted to manage apple scab without resistant varieties, you'd have to get up and remove every single one of these mummies, which totally isn't worth the time. So, but they give you a little bit of, character to your tree during the winter months.
Oh, yeah.
Is that what that is?
That's what we think about with mummies, is character. All right, Sarah, what do you have tonight?
Well, to go along with our St. Patrick's Day theme, we have another shamrock here, and this is a shamrock plant that's grown as a houseplant. It's actually related to the plant that Jeff showed, and it's related to the oxalis that we get in our lawns. It's in the genus Oxalis. This one, there's several species. This is, I think, Oxalis triangularis, and if you look really closely at the leaves, you can see that they are triangle shaped, and so that's kind of where they get that name. You see these in this bright green, like this sample. They also come in a really bright kind of purplish maroon color, which is very showy. And they either have white or pink flowers, like the white flowers you see here. They grow from tubers, so they have to have a resting period. So you'll grow it for now in the house. It likes cool conditions. If you can find a spot where you've got a bright window, but relatively cool conditions, like around 55, that would be a nice place for this plant. Definitely nothing above 75. That would be a little too hot. The plant would kind of stretch and the stems would get tall and lanky. Keep watering it and fertilizing it until the leaves kind of start to turn yellow and die back. At that point, the plant needs a resting period, and so stop watering it, let all the foliage die back, and then kind of trim it down. Put the container in a cool, dark place and let it rest for about 3 months. Then you can take it out, start watering it again, and it'll grow for you again and bloom like you see here today. But it does need that resting period periodically.
All right, thank you, Sarah. And that one is wanting some rest, and it is definitely a heavy drinker because it sat in my office and went like this. All right, Fred, you get the first picture. This is from a viewer who they don't mention where they're from, but white spots on the needles of part of an 8-foot evergreen tree on about 25% of the tree. Some of the needles on the branches are brown and falling off. Ooh. Others still look okay. They're wondering what it is on that particular spruce and what they can treat it with and when. So it's pretty covered.
That's a severe case of pine needle scale, one of the scale insects. And that's a very heavy infestation. Doesn't look quite as bad, but still very severe. Certainly is going to need to be treated. Okay, so the key to controlling scale insects is to control the crawlers. Pine needle scale has they have 2 generations a year, in May and in July. So the time that we would be looking for crawlers would be in May and July. And timing applications to control those crawlers is absolutely critical. And how do you know when the crawlers are active? Let me see, what have I got here? Oh, so if you just, take a piece of white paper out and you just put your hand, maybe with a glove on it, and tap it sharply over the piece of white paper, those crawlers, the immature scale insects, will drop down, and you'll be able to see them maybe with a hand lens, but see these little yellow things crawling around. Until you see those, you don't want to treat, because the products that we're going to be using don't last very long. So timing is really important. In terms of control, fairly straightforward. These crawlers are very sensitive to almost anything, so we can use something like an insecticidal soap, neem oil, and of course all the conventional insecticides like bifenthrin or 7 or permethrin 8. So any of those products would work, but timing is critical. A heavy infestation like that, probably going to need another treatment in July, when you get that second batch of crawlers coming out. So
right.
This is going to be one to get after. This is a really heavy infestation.
All right, thank you, Fred. This is from a viewer also, Jeff. Strange grass in yard.
Okay.
So she actually sent the picture. She took these last summer.
Okay, right.
And she's wanting to know whether or not she wants to control it this year.
Sure.
So that it's nice to get those questions.
Well, looking at the blade width of the grass and its appearance there next to the other turf grasses, I'm guessing that is nimblewill, which is a warm season grass. So right now, she may be able to detect the difference in the blades and kind of where it's located in her turf right now. Obviously, it would be dormant. It should be brown right now. It won't do anything for a while until things heat up. A couple treatments, a couple ideas for treatment would be to go into those spots and go ahead and dig those up, remove those areas, bring in some fresh soil, and then she can reseed that with turf that matches what she has in her yard. That may be, especially if they're small spots, that may be the simplest thing to do. Mm-hmm. Once it starts growing, if she doesn't get to it or if she misses some areas, which is probably likely, she can spot treat with something like Roundup. There's Tenacity out there, so it's another herbicide that you could use on nimblewill. But again, if it's small spots, I've had it in my yard. I've just dug it up, brought in some soil, reseeded, and I had good luck with that.
Excellent, thanks, Jeff. Amy, apples. This is a viewer who is kind of in the Gretna area.
Okay.
They have old apples on an acreage, old trees, and they've noticed that several of the big trees have these sort of torched, blackened branches. They want to know what it is. Can it be pruned out, or should it be pruned off?
It's a start of a canker of some sort. With an older apple, most likely we could be really running into some fire blight issues, which is a bacterial disease transmitted by our wonderful pollinators, or honeybees actually move it around from tree to tree. So you're not going to go after your pollinators to remove the spread of fire blight. The trick is, with a bacterial canker, you have to cut down that branch 8 inches below where you see that dead, darkening color, discoloration in the bark, because we want to make sure that we're well below where that bacteria is at. And just because we can't see it doesn't mean it isn't there. So depending on where you're seeing that on the tree, it may end up being full removal of the tree or removing some branches. There's also fungal cankers that can also give you that discoloration. If they're older apple trees, it may be a time to consider switching varieties and incorporating something new into the landscape. But you can prune out those areas, see how the apples are going to handle the stress, depending on how severe it is. If you are going to prune it out, you're going to want to do it here soon before they break dormancy, before it's too stressful on the tree.
Thanks, Amy. And speaking of pruning, Sarah, this is a viewer that has a young apple tree, or several of them. They want to know, when is the pruning window closed, and then kind of a quick piece of advice on actually where to search for good pruning tips.
Actually, the dormant period from end of February through the beginning of April is the prime time to do fruit tree pruning. So this would be a good time to get out there with your pruners and get that done. So with small trees like this, what you're trying to do in these first years of pruning is to establish a good architecture. Where are the main branches going to come out that will be your fruit producing branches in years to come? So you want to look at how far those branches are up from the ground, just for maintenance purposes, mowing around the base. And then you want the branches to be scattered evenly around the trunk, like the spokes of a wheel, and alternately up the trunk. So those are the things you kind of want to look for. If you have any branches that are growing very vertically with a narrow branch angle with the trunk, you want to eliminate those. You want wider branch angles because that will give you a stronger attachment between the branch and the trunk itself. There are some good pruning publications that are available through the University of Missouri. So what I might suggest you do is just go online, do a quick search, apple tree pruning, and then I always put university at the end, or you could put extension at the end, and you'll come up with university publications that can give you some reputable recommendations on how to do that pruning. So this is a good time to get out there and get it done now.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. Well, every year we try to pick out a theme that will set the tone for the rest of the season. In the past, we've looked at growing your own food, organics in your home garden, and beautiful plants and places. This year, we'd like to turn your attention to what gives beauty to our earth, puts flavor in our food, and sustains our lives. Of course, I'm talking about soil. Here we are with a brand new Backyard Farmer season, and the first question is, why should you care about soil? I'm standing by a plowed field. Nobody cares about soil. What's the big deal? We drive on it, we kill it, we dump things into it. We forget about the fact that if we don't have decent soil, we don't have living organisms of any sort, and that includes us. We have to treat our soil properly if we're going to grow plants, if we're going to drain water, if we're going to even support our buildings. So we're going to spend this season concentrating on what lies beneath, how we manage it, how we amend it, how we use it to create the kinds of beautiful, wonderful spaces and food that we need to be able to live on this planet. Whether at the scale of a major river or a small stream or your own backyard, the complexity of the interaction between soil and wind and water is such that we really need to pay attention to it. If we don't, we have erosion. The Dust Bowl days, we have flooding, which can carry with it all of that fabulous topsoil, leave us with a landscape that is littered with detritus and debris, the kinds of things that really don't have a place in any landscape and certainly don't contribute to the quality of the soil that supports our lives. We move our soil around in the landscape, whether it's with a garden spade or with a big old piece of equipment, and we pile it with great intentions of doing something with it later. As you can see behind me, we have soil that comes from beneath, the subsoil, filled with pieces of concrete and construction debris. We have some soil that looks as though it's got compost incorporated into it, and we probably have some stripped topsoil. All of these are garden elements or landscape elements that we have to figure out how to work with. If we could tell you one thing to do this season, it would be every single time you have an issue with a plant in your landscape, instead of looking up, look down. Figure out what is going on with what lies beneath. Is your soil soggy? Is your soil poorly drained? Is it lacking in nutrients? Those living organisms in the soil are essential to the creation of those living organisms above. So help us on Backyard Farmer this season as we help you figure out how to celebrate the International Year of Soil. As our growing season starts, we do want you to be mindful of how important it is to take care of your soil. Stay tuned to Backyard Farmer as we will be returning to this topic several times in the coming months. So before we get back to questions, we'd also like to invite our Twitter users to watch a new feature on our show. Each week, we're going to be tweeting out a question that we're going to ask our audience to answer. We're then going to be comparing your answers to our experts here on the panel. We'll feature one audience answer each week. So make sure you look for the Backyard Farmer Twitter question of the week. And so get ready to tweet or whatever it's called. I don't do that. Okay. So you get the next picture,
Okay.
Fred. This is a viewer who sent this one in, and she's got bur oak trees.
Okay.
And a few of them have survived in their windbreak, and she doesn't think this is supposed to be this way.
No. Again, what was this night of heavy infestations? Wow, look at that. So those are called oak bullet galls, and they go on a number of trees. Maybe they prefer bur oak, but we'll also see them on swamp white and some of the other oaks, though not normally at that kind of level. So you got to sort of understand the biology of what to control these things. It turns out that these are caused by a small gall wasp in the family Cynifidae, and this wasp overwinters as an adult. In the spring, she lays her eggs into the expanding twigs. All right, so that's the time that you can take action. So you need to come out, and when just as that growth is beginning to expand, that would be the time to apply a product. And you're going to need something that has some longer residual, so something like bifenthrin or permethrin or one of those. Again, typically the trees outgrow that, so it becomes less of a problem as trees get older. But there are some trees that never get over it, and there's may come a time that you actually need to just take that tree out and start over again, because some are very susceptible.
All right, thank you, Fred. Speaking of clover, here we come with clover in the turf.
Okay.
And this is a viewer who would like to know how to control it without doing a chemical kill, and why is it there to begin with?
Sure. Well, you know, originally, or it wasn't unusual for folks to have clover in their lawns anyway. It fixes nitrogen, you know, adds some color to the lawn. It's not foreign to American lawns until maybe more recently when we've been more fixated on having pure stands of grass. So I guess from that standpoint, I don't know if I'm personally bothered by clover so much on campus.
Honeybees like it.
Honeybees like them. So there's a lot of benefits to it. You know, if you're concerned, one way to handle it is really to just improve the growing conditions of your turf. So make sure you're mowing at the right height, you're fertilizing at the right time, you're fertilizing the right amount. If you're concerned about certain areas, you know, make sure you're aerating and overseeding at the right times. So I think it's just, you know, doing your cultural practices and doing a good job with that will help reduce the clover in your lawn.
Excellent, thank you, Jeff. Amy, this is a viewer who sent this image in,
Okay.
And it is a big pin oak, and they're wondering what kind of a rot or a spot that is.
It actually doesn't look like a rot or a spot. It looks like somebody thought they needed to fix the tree. So a lot of times we see winter injury, ice damage, wind damage, natural wear and tear, and we see branches falling off. And sometimes it strips down that bark. And with any of those type of injuries, people think we need to do something. I need to help the tree. And it looks like they put some type of artificial barrier. It could have been a crack in the tree and they're trying to fill it up. The trick is whenever you have any of that happen to your tree, do not do anything to the tree. You may need to cut or remove branches that may be hanging from ice injury or wind injury and make sure they're properly removed. But otherwise, you don't want to do anything to the tree. You don't want to paint those stumps, nothing. Because when you paint or add any type of foreign product, what you're going to do is you're going to capture basically a lot of pathogens behind that, and it's nice and wet, and all of a sudden you get rots. And it's going to rot the interior of your tree. So you're better off leaving it alone. The trees actually, once those injuries happen, or after you do a prune or a cut, the tree is very quickly sending out its own mechanism to block that wound. And within a few hours, even a few minutes, the tree's already blocked itself and it's put its own scab on it to protect itself. So never ever do anything adding to a wound on a tree. long term you're going to do more damage.
So leave the great stuff to the cracks in the garage.
Yeah, and I know it's really tempting if you have a big V
Right.
to fill it in and do something. Just leave it alone. You might have some critters live in it, but just leave it alone.
Okay. Sarah, this is a viewer who had backyard raspberries, Heritage, and left them standing, and this is what they have now, and they're wondering what is the ideal pruning to get kind of a big single crop rather than a few berries over the entire summer.
Okay, so Heritage is a cultivar of raspberries that you can manage it two ways. You can get a spring harvest and a fall harvest, or you can manage it just to get one harvest that's a little bit later in the summer. And so if you wanted to do that, just the one big harvest, then what you would do is just cut all the stems down now. In fact, some gardeners will just take a lawnmower and they'll just go into the patch and they'll just mow them down. But you can do that, or you can do it by hand. So just cut the stems down. All the new growth will come from the crowns this spring, and then all of those new stems will produce fruit, and you'll have a harvest a little bit later, probably around the end of June.
All right. Excuse me. Thank you, Sarah. Well, we've had a few days of very unseasonably warm weather, and a lot of people turn their attention in the spring to their lawns. But for our green and growing tip, our turf grass specialist, Bill Kreuzer, tells us to relax for the time being.
This great warm spring weather is really getting all of us out of the doors and ready to start thinking about taking care of our lawns again. And it's easy to be excited about taking care of your lawn and want to go out and start growing again. And one thing we need to do now is exercise some patience and not go out and start ripping up the turf until it really starts to grow again. A lot of homeowners like to go out and try to dethatch or aerate, but the grass isn't growing and it's really still in kind of a fragile state coming out of winter. And so what we want to do is just clean up any type of leaves that may have been from last fall, and pick up any type of debris that's on the yard. So when we do have to mow, we don't have to worry about mowing anything over, and making sure that the lawn is ready to go. But try to avoid things like vertical mowing and fertilizing until the grass really starts to grow again, and then you can use those practices in a couple weeks.
A little bit of spring cleaning and giving it a drink of water are okay for right now, but you're going to want to wait a little bit to give the grass a chance to grow before you start mowing, aerating, and fertilizing. I heard an awful lot of lawnmowers when it was 91 degrees this weekend. I don't want to mow yet. Okay, Fred, this is a Lincoln viewer that called in a question about chiggers in the lawn every single year.
Okay.
Anything they can do now to prevent grandchildren from being chewed up?
Well, they're all in the egg stage or immatures right now, so really need to wait till about late May, early June is typically when the chiggers are actually out and active. And they managing the lawn well, keeping it pushed back away from the area that people inhabit is always a good idea. And of course, you can always use an insecticide to control them in the lawn. Wearing insecticide repellent like DEET that contains DEET is very important, and that's probably the best way to protect oneself from chiggers. Right. And I know because I'm a chigger magnet.
Okay, thanks, Fred. Jeff, we don't know where this viewer's from, but they have buffalo grass on an empty lot.
Okay.
And they're wondering how to control the weeds and when is the best time to do that. And they are after a herbicide.
Okay. Well, right now, obviously, isn't the best time. I know sometimes folks want to use Roundup. That was this winter, in the middle of the winter, maybe if you really wanted to do some Roundup treatment. Now isn't the time for that. And again, kind of like what we were talking here, we want to wait for things to really start actively growing. Buffalo grass could be pretty sensitive to herbicide at this stage. So we want to wait a while, maybe sometime in May if things have warmed up and the buffalo grass is doing well and you've got a mowing in. You can go and try to use something like a Trimac, a three-way product. You can use that as long as the temperatures stay below, the mid-80s. So I think you'll be safe.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Amy, this is a viewer in Ogallala, and apparently they had a weeping elm. And the branches have turned black. They wonder if they should be concerned about this.
I would be concerned. Black is probably indicating it probably has died. Sorry, I'm not pretty blunt about it. You give it a little bit of time, see if it's going to bud out. The other trick you can do is I've actually went out and did it to some of my trees. You can go and start twisting them and trying to snap. If they snap off, it's dead. If it's going to give you a little bit of give, it could still be green and you may have some hope. What it actually caused it's hard for me to say right now. I don't know a lot of things that affect weeping elms, but you can just say some prayers and maybe it'll come back.
And send us a picture because they're pretty rare.
Yeah. Is that a camperdown?
I'm guessing it was a camperdown. Yeah. All right, Sarah, this is a viewer who wants to know whether they should water their Easy Elegance roses, hydrangeas, and iris. They have watered their evergreens, and again, we're not sure where they're from.
Okay. Yeah, we are getting quite a few questions about watering since it's been so dry. And it wouldn't be a bad idea. People think sometimes if you start to water, it's going to encourage those plants to grow earlier, which is not really the case because plant growth is based on air temperature as well as soil temperature. But giving the roots a little bit of a drink of water as they start to become active as soil temperatures get warmer would be a good idea. So I've already been out with the hose in my yard watering some evergreens and some shrubs and things like that. So I would say go ahead.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, it's a tradition to take a look at our garden each week. As we've started the season pretty early this year, there isn't a whole lot to look at. But even now, our crew of master gardeners are preparing that soil and getting plants started in the greenhouse for the season. Before we go to break, let's take a minute to see what's happening out at the Backyard Farmer Garden. Our very first week in 2015 in the Backyard Farmer Garden finds us with nothing much coming out of the ground and 2 weeks earlier than normal. That said, our master gardeners are so excited about what they're going to be doing in the garden this season. They've got things going in the greenhouse. They've had a whole bunch of planning meetings. They dug the soil and tilled it and turned it last fall, which is exactly what should have happened. And since this is the International Year of Soil, we'll be talking a lot about what we're doing to manage our own soil in the Backyard Farmer Garden. We also have some new crops that we'll be displaying, including the All-America selections. We have a great group of students that are going to be involved. Our Doctor of Plant Health students will be doing some things in association with the garden to show people how to actually manage things correctly. Everything from annuals to some of those perennial vegetables. We'll be throwing in some fruit trees and some small fruits this year along edges of the garden, starting what we hope will be an excellent vine up our entrance arbor, and of course up the hill building things like walls. So that's what's happening our very first week in the Backyard Farmer Garden. It's time for a short break. Coming up on our show, we'll have Gladys's Plant of the Week and the lightning round. Stay tuned for more Backyard Farmer right after these messages. Welcome back to Backyard Farmer. Coming up later in the program, Rock and I will debate the benefits and problems with clover. You can still phone in your questions by dialing 1-800-676-5446. And while you're doing that, we're starting the lightning round. Sarah, are you ready?
I'm ready.
We have a viewer who said their children planted the seeds from Braeburn apples and they sprouted. They're wondering if they're going to get any fruit.
It will grow into a tree and probably would have fruits, but they wouldn't necessarily be like the Braeburns.
All right. Water everywhere. Should people be watering perennials as well as other things since it's so dry?
I think it would be a good idea to get your hose out and start watering.
Okay. When should a person uncover their tea roses?
It's a little early yet. It's still only mid-March, even though it's 90 degrees out this week. So wait until about the first part of April.
Okay. When should butterfly bushes be pruned?
I would wait on that too until mid-April or until they start to put out new growth and you can see what has actually died back.
And when should Chuckle's shrub rose be pruned?
Well, you could prune out old dead stems now if you can see where the dead wood is. If you're a kind of a nervous pruner, I would wait again until they start to grow, and then you know for sure where to make the cuts.
All right. How early can peas be planted?
Now.
Excellent. And that is lightning.
All right.
Pretty darn good.
Good.
Wow.
Ready, Amy?
Sarah set a high standard. I don't know.
A lot of yes, no's. Yes? No. No. Yes?
Pass.
Pass.
No. Okay, what is, Amy, the spray window for tip blight in pines?
Tip blight is as those new needles are emerging, so the tips are just coming out. So you don't want them more than 1/2 inch to 1 inch.
And are there differences in the kinds of diseases pines get that would mean different sprays at different times?
Yes, there's definitely differences, so you need to know what you're trying to manage.
All right. Will good sanitation under pines control the disease?
Most of the time not, because the spores are actually surviving on the pine cones most of the time, and the cones are going to stay on the trees for a duration of time.
All right. This person had scabby potatoes last year. Should they replace the soil or give up and buy them?
There isn't anything you can really do for the soil. You can do some recommendations, say really flood and get it too wet, but then you run into other issues. Just peel those areas off and you're fine.
All right. Is there snow mold this year anywhere in the state yet?
I haven't seen any snow mold. We haven't had enough snow to cause a problem.
All right. Tomato stems with blight ended up in the compost pile.
As long as your compost is going to the correct temperature, you shouldn't have a problem at all.
Excellent. And what is that temperature? Well, I'm shuffling papers.
Oh, we want to get above 120, 130 degrees at least.
All right. Nice job. Okay, Jeff, it's turf question.
Okay. Prune now. Well, no, wait. Okay.
Okay. This is actually a Clarkson viewer. Is Tenacity available for homeowners, or do you need a commercial license to use it?
I believe it's available for homeowners.
All right. We have a Blue Hill viewer who wonders about the timing for crabgrass pre-emerge because of the weather.
Well, typically we say that first week of May. It may be a little sooner than that. I would keep watching the show, but I would still say it's going to be late April.
All right. When should turf be aerified since it's so dry?
Well, we want to wait till things are actively growing. So again, I'd wait till you have a good mowing in or two, and then you can think about aerating.
Okay, and do they have to water first?
It always helps to water first, yeah.
Okay. Is there any really good reason to mow really short right now to clean things up?
No, there isn't.
Okay, and if turf should be watered now, if people can, how much water should they apply?
Well, I would check the soil and make sure that it's still moist. Do that screwdriver test. And, if you need to put down in 1/2 inch or so of water a week at this time, that wouldn't hurt this time of year.
All right, excellent. Nice job. Ready, Fred?
I am ready.
Okay. Is emerald ash borer in Nebraska yet?
Not to the best of our knowledge, but it's very, very close.
Okay, hiding somewhere. When should this viewer with a big old windbreak start looking for sawflies on their pines?
Probably, let's see, it's March, probably mid-April.
Mid-April. Okay, and once they find them, what do they do?
They're relatively easy to control. If they're just a few, you knock them off with a stick. Otherwise, almost any insecticide, Sevin works, for instance, works very well.
All right. This viewer saw butterflies in their yard when it was warm this weekend. Will they live?
Yeah, if it doesn't get too cold. But many of those overwinter is chrysalis, and the butterflies are emerging. I saw some too.
Okay. When should this viewer expect the very first pollinators to start heading for plants?
Oh, they're already out now, because that could be flies.
Okay. What is the timing to treat for Zimmerman pine moth?
Generally around the 25th of April or thereabouts.
Excellent. Oh my goodness, you look at that.
It's a
Did
record,
I say
right?
6, 6, 6, 6, and 6? Say that 6 times quickly. Excellent job. Okay, Sarah, so Gladys has shared something that is beautiful but deadly.
Definitely. I mean, look at the thorns on this thing.
My.
This is called crown of thorns, and you can see why when you look closely at the stems. They do have some wicked thorns. I'm going to turn it, though, a little bit so you can see more of the pretty flowers here. Maybe that's a little, well, maybe not. Yeah. Sorry, here's the better side, I guess. This is a succulent plant. It's in the Euphorbia family. And so if you were to cut a stem, you would see that it has white sap like you would find on a poinsettia. It likes to grow in very, very bright light, and it likes to be dry. So this is one you definitely don't want to overwater. What you're seeing there are not actually flowers, but colored bracts. And the true flowers are those little tiny structures down inside the colored bracts. Leave it to Gladys to have one that has this big of colored bracts. The crowns of thorn that I usually see have much, much smaller bracts on them than this, not quite as showy, but boy, Gladys are really huge and just really stand out. This is not a winter hardy plant in Nebraska, so this is something you would have to grow as a house plant. And again, provide it with a very bright sunny window and let it grow on the dry side.
And she is just amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't she just, wow. Thank you so much, Gladys, and isn't that cool? I'm glad
Definitely.
she has it, not me. Okay. So, Fred, you get the next picture.
Okay.
This is a viewer in the Omaha area, and they think they have scale on their purple leaf winter creeper. They want to know, do they, and how do they control since it's a broadleaf evergreen?
Okay, it's it's euonymus scale, what we would call it. And again, it's very closely related to the pine needle scale that we talked about just a little earlier. Interesting, it also goes to bittersweet. So we'll see the same one on bittersweet pines. Okay, so controlling the crawlers is the key. This one also has, like pine needle scale, also has 2 generations a year. So we're going to be looking for crawlers in May and then again in July. So take that sheet of white paper, tap it out in early to mid-May, depending on the temperatures that year, and see when the crawlers are present, then it's time to treat. Again, crawlers are very easy to control, so you can use a soap, insecticidal soap, neem oil, or any of the conventional insecticides like Sevin or permethrin.
All right, thank you, Fred. Jeff, we have several viewers who have noticed this bitty weed.
Okay.
They think it's a weed in their landscape. One saw it blooming as early as first part of February, and now they're seeing it bloom again. Pretty
Okay.
little blue flowers.
Right.
What is it, and should it be controlled or just enjoyed?
Well, it's a Veronica, so a Speedwell. It's a winter annual. So depending on where you have it, I mean, like you say, it's some color this time of year amongst all the brown stuff out there. So that might be the upside. But if you want to control it, this time of year, it doesn't really make any sense to use any herbicides. I would go out with a soil rake, a stiff rake. You can rake it up pretty well, hoe it up, pull it up, and get rid of it that way. In those areas, if it's in the lawn area, you may want to consider using a pre-emerge in the late summer next year. That will help control it. But again, it's kind of those cultural things, making sure that you've fertilized properly, seeded properly, maintained the area right, and that will probably eliminate most of it as you go forward.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Amy, we talked a little bit of pruning roses, but this is a viewer who has roses that appear to have some issues.
Okay.
And you want to talk about some of the things you're seeing in there and whether that can be controlled with pruning or not.
Okay. So there's a couple things that we see going on here. We have a canker development. You can see that darker discoloration on the cane, which is a fungal disease. But we can also have black spot that will also form a canker. Right now is a wonderful time to go out and take a look at those roses if you've uncovered them, okay? Depending on where you're at, you may not have uncovered them yet. But before they start leafing out, it's a great time to go ahead and prune below those. You're gonna go do your correct rose pruning, go down below and remove those canes. It's also a great time if you've had black spot issues on your leaves to thin out that crown so you get better air movement before the roses break dormancy. So great time to look for any discoloration, go ahead and cut below that discoloration.
And it's pretty obvious, I think, usually on rose canes.
It is.
Okay, good. Speaking of roses, Sarah, we have a viewer who took a picture of this particular thing in their rose and wondered, what is it and what should they do about it?
This is an abnormal growth that we sometimes see in ornamental plants called fasciation, and it can be caused by a lot of different things. There are some viruses, bacteria that can cause this. Also, just some environmental conditions or physical damage to the growing tip of the plant that can cause this. And so what you see is a stem that instead of being round the way it normally should be, it becomes flattened, and the buds, instead of coming out normally, will just kind of occur randomly through this flattened stem. Usually this is not a contagious kind of a thing, although, you know, I did say that the virus and possibly bacteria could be involved in some cases. Oftentimes, though, it just appears like on one branch or one part of a plant. So you could just leave it and enjoy it because it doesn't really cause a lot of damage, or you could prune it out if you want to get rid of that oddity. It's not all that common, but it's not a serious problem. It's just really more of kind of a garden oddity.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, to help celebrate St. Patrick's Day, we thought we'd feature clover. To some it's a weed, to others it's an ornamental, as Jeff said, that might have a variety of uses. Right now, we're going to hear the pros and cons from Rock and me.
I'm Rockaswa, and I don't like clover.
I'm Kim Todd, and I love clover.
But you know, Kim, you're probably right. There is a place for clover in the landscape, and as a matter of fact, you can buy pure bags of really high quality seed to put in the landscape that's just white Dutch clover, and you can put it in a planting bed, but by itself, where you're not going to have to spray herbicides and other things, and you can keep it relatively clean and pure.
Okay, so actually we're agreeing with one another on this one?
Yeah, hard to believe.
Hard to believe. And we're going to use Dutch clover in our courtyard as an alternative turf in a location where we've had trouble with the turf itself. But where I've seen Dutch clover used as an alternative turf, it's tall. Is that the same thing that we're trying to get rid of in a well-manicured lawn, or is it a different species entirely?
No, it's the same species. You know, white Dutch clover is what we see in our lawns. The interesting thing is, though, is that it's mowing. Mowing makes it more shorter to the ground. The leaves get a little bit smaller. And as a matter of fact, in low-maintenance lawns, you often see that sort of happen with even Shasta daisy. You can mow them down. So it's mowing height. It's the same thing.
Okay, and so if people really want an ornamental and they want the pollinators and they want to use it as a landscape plant, they actually have the option of one with variegated foliage that also provides good luck because it's got 4-leaf clovers.
You know, Kim, prior to the 1940s, they put clover seed in a grass seed mixture to make it a little bit cheaper. Unfortunately, what happened then is that the clover took the lawn over and it became a weed problem. And everyone says it fixes nitrogen, you know, it makes its own nitrogen. The trouble is the plant makes enough nitrogen for itself, but not necessarily for the rest of the lawn, and it looks for a kind of a lawn that's out of shape and out of color. So that's a negative about that. So then we have to control it. And when we have to control it, there's a number of ways. We start introducing herbicides and other things into the environment. And when we do that, that's a negative. So you have a clover in a lawn and you want that picture perfect lawn. The clover is just way out of touch. Bottom line, clover in a lawn is a bad thing.
Okay, Rock, the reason I like clover is because I like the difference in texture. I love the scent. I like the fact that it does attract pollinators. And in those places in the lawn where the soil is terrible and won't grow turf, it seems like clover will come in, at least fill in the landscape during the growing season. And I think a downside of that also, though, is that it's either rhizomatous or stoloniferous or seed produced or all of those things. And in the winter months in Nebraska, you don't really have anything where the clover was. So I don't know that I disagree with you that it belongs in a really highly manicured lawn. But I think in the lawn situation where people really don't care what it is, they just want to have something green that they can mow, clover might be a good solution in my mind.
So is it a yes?
It's a no.
No, it's a yes.
No, it's a no.
It's a yes, it's a no.
Yes, it's a yes.
No, it's a yes.
No, it's a no.
No, it's yes, it's a no.
Yes, it's a no. Well, the world may never know that I won that debate, but it's clear that a lot of clover isn't really welcome in Rock's mind in a well-manicured lawn. However, used as an ornamental or in places where establishing turf is almost impossible, it really does have some benefits like attracting pollinators and providing ground cover and good luck.
Yeah.
So there we go. And we are going to seed it in the courtyard, so that'll be fun to see
Wow, yeah.
Right.
as a cover crop. And a turf. All right, you get a picture, Fred. This is American cranberry bush viburnum.
Okay.
And the viewer thought it was an insect gall of some sort. And I think you took a look and...
Yeah, as I look at that, it does not look like an insect gall.
So why not?
Well, it just has the wrong shape and design. They're usually more symmetrical. That looks like some sort of a pathogen, perhaps. Amy?
And actually it is. It's a pathogen called crown gall. It isn't something we see very often. It's actually caused by a bacterium. And if there's a wound from insects, any type of wind injury, anything like that, it's a prime opportunity. And it looks like a cancerous growth. The best thing you can do is prune it out. The interesting thing is once upon a time, they thought the cure to cancer was actually from that bacteria. It isn't though.
Interesting. Good. Nice to share. Okay. So, Jeff, we have, I don't know how many questions about the snow melted. They found these trails. I suspect Dennis would say voles.
Right.
And then, of course, they're wondering how do you repair the turf when you've got vole tells and vole cities going on?
Right. Well, usually with voles, what they're doing is they'll mow off kind of the leaf up down to the crown of the grass. So they typically don't do a lot of damage. And something like that, what I would suggest is, again, going in there with a stiff rake, cleaning things up. You know, you kind of clean up the leaves that have been, the grass has been clipped off and the manure and that sort of thing that the voles have left behind. In areas that you're concerned, I mean, again, like we talked about before, you could go in later and do some aerating and overseeding in areas like that. Probably the biggest thing that you need to be concerned about is cover. So that's why they were there. There was snow covering it, so they were there. Now that the cover's gone, they've gone back to wherever they were. And so you might want to look at those locations around your yard. If you have a perennial bed or something, maybe we go in and cut that back a little earlier than normal to help kind of encourage them to move someplace else. Or if you have a field, maybe keep it mowed for a while, that sort of thing. Again, reduce that cover so that they go to someplace else that isn't a concern.
Okay, good. And for our viewers who do have voles, I'm sure Dennis will address that next time he's on as
Voles love hostas.
They love pretty much everything at my house. Okay, Amy, this is a viewer up in the Bennington area, so north. They have spruce, and they see these dead tips, and they saw this last fall as well, kind of on new growth, sort of, but not old. So is this a disease issue or winter injury?
If it's affecting the new growth, it most likely is a disease, and it's called Serococcus shoot blight. And it only attacks the new foliage. And as we get new foliage coming on, typically in May, June, it actually gives a purple hue as the fungus infects. I see it on a wide variety of ages of blue spruce. You can't really prune it out. You can go in with a fungicide application. It's going to be a copper-based product. The trick is, depending on how large your spruce is, you have to spray it until drip. So for an older, more mature tree, that's very difficult. You have to hire somebody. If it's a smaller tree, you can definitely do it on your own. Like I said, any copper type product. And you're gonna make those applications as those needles are coming out, and you're probably gonna have to repeat a couple times if the weather is wet.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Sticking with spruce, Sarah, this is a Milford viewer that has Norway spruce, small ones in their windbreak, and has one that apparently has a very perfect double leader. Wants to know, can they manage this? It's about a 3-foot tree, young.
Sure, this is actually a really good stage of growth to be managing these double leaders right now. So what I would do is just go in and choose one of those to be the central leader. You might look for the one that's more upright or maybe the one that's more vigorous, and then just go down to the junction where they meet and totally trim out the other one. And the one that you leave will take over and become the new central leader for that tree.
Excellent.
So it's pretty easy to do.
Excellent. Young is better.
Yes, that's right.
All right. Well, we have announcements to share with our viewers, and a couple of them, one of them being the Spring Garden Conference for the West Potawatomi Master Gardeners, March 28th. We have a number on the screen on that one, so that's kind of a fun thing for people to participate in. And we also have, we will be at the Omaha Home Show, which is Saturday, March 28th and Sunday, March 29th at CenturyLink. So those will also be posted on our website. We like to share good stuff going on in the gardening world. All right, a couple quick questions. So we have a Grand Island viewer, Fred and or Amy, that wants to know when to spray apples with what. So is this a fruit tree spray that is one shot hits all?
I'll start.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So you know, it's really just about getting past the time to do a dormant spray, which will control the mites and the scale insects and all of those.
Okay.
So, but we're right on the edge of all that. But you know, generally you start your cover sprays right after petal fall. We don't want to be spraying anything during the blooming period, because that's when all the pollinators are out, and not only will we lose our fruit crop, but we'll also kill pollinators. So
Okay, and we have about 20 seconds,
Okay,
Amy.
on the fungicides portion, we're actually going to start as those leaves are coming out and as we see wet weather to protect us from apple scab and cedar apple rust. University of Michigan has a wonderful fruit spray calendar, and if you've had any concerns, just go to their calendar and it tells you growth stages to make those applications.
Okay, and in 10 seconds or less, Jeff, ethanol in your lawnmower, good idea or bad?
You know, I would look at the manual that comes with your small engine equipment. So, and that should direct you on what you can use and what kind of additives and that sort of thing.
Okay, so if it says go ahead and use olive oil, go right ahead.
If it says olive oil, go for it.
All righty. And unfortunately, that is all the time we have for Backyard Farmer. We're looking forward to answering your questions throughout the growing season. That's all for tonight. Thanks to our panel for another great show, and to everybody who submitted questions and pictures. Helping us on the phones tonight, we had Master Gardeners Gladys Juring, George Edgar, Carol Rustad, Cynthia Connor, and UNL Extension Horticulture Assistant Terry James. From Finke Gardens was Luann Finke. Next time on Backyard Farmer, we'll show you a simple hoop house to help you extend your gardening season. We'll also show you some tips and techniques for pruning hydrangeas. So good night, good gardening, and we'll see you all next week right here on Backyard Farmer.